tuning in today, everyone. I just want to let you know my book is out and available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The name is Parents, Our Greatest Teachers. And now, back to our episode. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Alex Valgood, and this is Leap of Health. And today we have Heidi Toy. She's a functional medicine practitioner, certified nutritional therapist. She also does this diagnostic medical sonographer. She's also a mom and a foodie, and she's an athlete, and we love all of that. Today, we're going to be talking nutrition and why it's so important. Thank you, Heidi, for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I look forward to talking with you all.
Thank you. Thank you. But before we get into all this nutritional stuff and information, tell us a little bit about your story and how do you came to be a nutritionist and a holistic practitioner?
Okay. Well, in 2006, actually prior to that, when I did ultrasound, I'll go back even back into the 1990s, late 1990s, I was starting to feel sick, and I knew that I had something wrong because I would do an ultrasound of my neck and I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis because it looks a certain way on the ultrasound, but I would go to the doctor and my labs would come back normal. They would come back in range, but I could feel it. And then finally I went to an endocrinologist, and he was doing his notes and everything, because I would always go through like my obstetrics gynecologist for these tests and they wouldn't do anything with it. And I went to the endocrinologist and basically asked him if he would please listen. And this was back in the day of films, not digital yet. So he had a flip box, and I turned the lights on his view box and hung my films up. And he went, "You have Hashimoto's." And I said, yes, thank you. So at that time, I didn't realize, I knew it was an autoimmune because I did ultrasounds and I was part of the diagnostic process with that. And it was different when I did ultrasounds back in that day because the sonographer in that time was the only person who actually knew how to read the ultrasound. The doctors still, I was training the doctors how back in the 1990s. And now that's kind of changed. They know what's going on, but they can't say. So anyway, so back onto this, then I still wasn't recovering from the symptoms, despite the fact that they gave me Synthroid. And I was working with a lot of the top people because then I had moved into leading diagnostic ultrasound through development and worked for a number of different ultrasound companies doing that. And they would give me Synthroid, but I still was debilitatingly fatigued and losing my hair and gaining weight and doing all the things that they just kept giving. And my thyroid kept getting destroyed, and I had a full neck and I was losing my eyebrows, and because that's a symptom of Hashimoto's, because when you lie down at night, the inflammation goes to your face. And so a lot of times people who suffer from autoimmune thyroid, they lose the outer 2/3 of their eyebrow. So that was all happening to me. And then fast forward, I at the time lived in Indiana when this happened, Indianapolis, then Seattle, and then was living in New York City. And a friend of mine said, you should go see this person. She does this thing called functional medicine. And I was like, functional what? And so I went to her, and again, now this was in 2005 or 6, somewhere in that time frame. And at that time, people didn't even know what eating gluten-free was. So, and that's not all she did. I'm just stating that that's kind of where we were at. And so I remember walking into her office, and she ran a series of tests. And I actually, at this point in time, went because I couldn't lose weight. And despite really working out and eating what I thought was healthy, I mean, a super healthy, high whole grain diet, barely eating meat, tons of soy milk, all these different things. Yep. And I thought it was because it was the health standard. And I remember at first it was like, oh my gosh, she's very expensive. And I didn't know what she was, talking about, but she ran all these different tests and came back and said, losing weight is the least of your worries, and started telling me all the things I had, that I was adrenal fatigue, that I had parasites, that all my markers, I couldn't recycle glutathione, the master antioxidants, all these different things. So I signed up for a program with her, started working with her, and because I couldn't go out and partake now all of a sudden, because my diet switched to a Paleolithic diet. And at that time, people weren't even talking paleo AIP, paleo autoimmune diet. So I was doing strict paleo, and I really couldn't go out to eat because people didn't know what I was talking about. So I wasn't, and I was tired. So and when I say I was tired, I was like, just to give one little slice of that, at that time in New York, I lived right across from the UN. My territory was New York Metro. I was a sales rep now for ultrasound. I had left leading development. I was running a Northeast corridor and selling ultrasound equipment. I had a lot of pressure on me because I had a very high, I had hit a high mark as far as sales, and I was 100% commission based. So all of this deteriorated my health as well. But where I'm going with that, but before I get into the healing, is that I slept. I would get up in the morning. I would go do a sales call. Luckily, it was the New York Metro, so I could get around easily. I would go do a sales call. I would come home, eat something, go to sleep, go and take a nap, get up in the afternoon, go do another sales call, come home, eat dinner, and go to bed. So I was at the time 36 years old, 35, 36. So it was like, this is not living. And so, but I went to her because I couldn't lose weight. That was my main concern. Like I wanted to be hot, I mean, and I think, a lot of women do, and men. So, it was like, that was part of the gig for me. And of course everybody still wants to look nice. I don't mean that, but
we get you.
Right. But what I'm trying to say is that I had to shift the mindset. So anyway, I went to this woman. She was a functional medicine person. I didn't know what it was. She helped me. She ran tests. And then because I couldn't go do things in my healing, I could go do things, but I was really limited on where I could go eat and things of that nature. So I was saying no to a lot of social things, and probably developing a little orthexia, a little, too over the top, but I wanted to heal. I really wanted my life back. Plus I was going bold. I was actually shopping for wigs. Like if you pulled back my hair, and now you can see I have lots of hair, but if you pulled back my hair, this was all gone. I looked like, well, I can't think of that guy's name it doesn't matter. But anyway, so that all being said, I would sit and research and research and research. And so then I went to her with all these questions. I'd write her a book probably practically every day. And the one time she even asked me, would it be okay if you let me be the doctor? Anyway, so through all that, I healed, but she asked me at the tail end of my healing, have you ever considered being what I am? And I said, yes. And she said, you should, you'd be good at it. And I already had the background because I hold 4 registries in diagnostic ultrasound, and I had the undergrad. And so then I went forward and started studying to do this. And I piecemealed it together through nutrition and through like taking things through the Kalish Institute. I did his 18 months practitioner training, and Dr. Kratzian is another person that I am currently right now. And I do rounds with them currently. And so I keep all of that up. I sit different rounds with them on a weekly basis, actually, classes, where you go through case studies. But nonetheless, then I graduated. I think that's what we're still on. Sorry, I'm kind of like going through my whole history here. So I really adopted this lifestyle. I stay with a Paleolithic, paleo autoimmune diet. There's some things I can have, like, and I can have nuts and seeds. For those listeners that might not be familiar, there's paleo where you can't have any grains, but paleo autoimmune, you cannot have, it's more restrictive where you don't eat eggs, you don't eat nuts and seeds, You also don't eat the legumes, which is already on paleo, and you wouldn't have certain nightshades. And I can have some of that. So I can't have eggs, but I can have nuts and seeds. So I'm a paleo-ish. And I don't drink caffeine, but I do have some cold filtered decaf coffee, and I will put a tablespoon of heavy cream in my coffee. So in any event, I went through the nutrition route where I had considered being a naturopath, and I'm still actually considering going back for that, but that's a different story. And then I moved out of New York, moved to where I live now, which is in Wisconsin. You probably can totally hear that in my accent, which was where I was born and raised, even though I left for 20 some years. My mother she's an immigrant. She's from Finland. And so my accent is from her. English is her second language. And I didn't plan on staying here, but she asked me if I would stay for 6 months, and 6 months turned into 9 years. Started a practice here, seeing people locally and globally. Now I've seen over nearly 1,700 people is what we've counted between my assistant and I, kind of looking at all that data. And healing, let's just see, I stick with this. I live and walk the lifestyle. Like I said, the diet, sleep is huge to me. I exercise, I get a lot of movement in. I don't look at exercise just as about, sweating it out. It's more about movement and all of the benefits from movement. Sometimes if it's because I live in a cold climate, if I need to get out because I have a dog, you might have seen her, but if I don't get out for long walks with her, I'll just put on music and dance around because I want to be fluid and move my body. So that's kind of where my story started and where I am now. And now I have the joy of helping other people gain back their health, which is my mission and my passion, is to see other people all ages go through this and gain back their health. And then I have another little thing with movement and exercise is I have a full kind of like a CrossFit gym in my basement. And I love to help women, and I don't charge any money for this part, who are 45 and older. I have some ladies that are actually come to me in their 70s who have never lifted weights, and help them develop a healthy habit around lifting weights, because it's so great for osteoporosis and osteopenia and insulin sensitivity of building that muscle. That muscle helps the bone. All the different things. And also I like that because like they'll go to work, do something usually with their husbands, like say, take the dock out of the water, because we have to take our docks out here in the wintertime. And the husband's like, you got it? Yeah, I got it, because they're doing this weightlifting and all of a sudden they've gotten super strong, and they don't necessarily want to do it in the gym. They want to do it where they're not intimidated. And I want to have them have a safe environment. So my entire gym, or my entire basement, is matted with all kinds of equipment. And then I also have a sauna down there, far near middle infrared sauna. So, I walk this walk and I love it. And that's where I'm at.
Oh, that's
that's a
amazing.
lot. I just told you a lot. Sorry, I didn't let you get a word in edgewise.
No. That was great. Thank you for sharing all that. And it's amazing. I'm glad you're feeling good. You look amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Like in my early 30s. And I'm like, what?
I'm 52 years old. I don't have a problem telling anybody that.
For everybody that's watching this on YouTube, she looks like 35, just so you know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I look 35, but thanks, I'll take it.
No, yeah, she looks really amazing. And I'm sure it's not just a coincidence. Everything and all the changes that you've been making have make you not only be healthy on the inside, but definitely look amazing on the outside too. I think it's
100%.
it's a whole thing. Mm-hmm. I was talking to another guest the other day, and she said we're like a whole system.
We are 100%.
Yeah, I love the concept. It's a whole system. We're not like, I'm gonna just work out and eat whatever I want, because
Mhm.
it doesn't correlate one thing and the other. Like you really have to do both. Eat amazing so your body also looks amazing. And
Mhm.
obviously exercising and all that, it is going to help. It's an amazing part of our lives that if we do, our body, becomes like beautiful and amazing and
Mhm.
and all these things, and it will keep us around for a long time. uh, I love that you touch on the on the nutrition part. I know, like when you were going through your healing, you had to take a lot of changes in your food habits. What
Mhm.
are some of the things that you used to eat just on the regular basis that you thought they were like super healthy? And that when you were in this journey of healing, you were like, holy cow, I thought eating blah, 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 it was good for my health, but it was more damaging than helping my body. What are some of those changes that you made?
Well, a big one is, of course, bread, and whole wheat bread. And again, I mentioned my mom is from Finland, and so she makes amazing like pastries and bread, and she would make all of our bread homemade as a child. And so I really liked thick, coarse brown bread with butter on it. And the butter wasn't the bad thing, but the brown bread, of course. And um, that was a big change. And then I loved Life cereal with soy milk in it. And oftentimes I wouldn't eat, I would come home because I was busy. And so dinner would be this big bowl of Life cereal and with toasted brown bread with a smear of peanut butter on it. And I thought I was totally eating healthy because I was always counting my fiber, which we should be counting our fiber. But news flash to me, vegetables have fiber. Okay. And I did eat vegetables. I don't mean to say I didn't like them or I didn't eat them, because I did eat them. I just was looking at all this fiber in this fiber nutrient dense bread. And so that was a big thing. I was never really a huge, even though I lived in New York City, I was never a huge pizza eater. So that wasn't like a big news flash to me. Or I mean, no, because people do think that pizza is a healthy complete food, and it can be, but that's not something that I really missed or gave up. But that was one thing that was in my diet. And then another thing was that I didn't eat enough animal protein. And as there's a couple things, is one, as we age, we're not able to use protein the same as what we are when we're younger. So once we start going through perimenopause and menopause, and women get older, and men as well, we need to increase the protein intake. And so that was one big thing. And I didn't have really an affinity for eating any meat. And a big thing with people that have autoimmune, and most often, or moreover, I should say, like Hashimoto's and thyroid issues, they lack stomach acid. And so if you lack stomach acid, and it can be for a variety of reasons that we lose stomach acid. I mean, it can be that we're taking antacids. It can be that we don't have enough zinc or B1, or drink enough water, because it's called hydrochloric acid. So it's a combination of electrolytes and B1 and all of that. And it can be that you're just simply not eating enough meat, or you have H. pylori, which I did, which is a bacteria that lives around the pyloric sphincter that separates the stomach and the small intestine. Because I also had GERD in my 30s. I was already starting to develop GERD, and I was living on the purple pill for some time, and then I worked myself off it. But so back to the nutrition, I didn't eat enough meat. And because my own innate intelligence knew that I wasn't breaking it down and digesting it, and that does go hand in hand with Hashimoto's autoimmune. So I really didn't have an affinity, and I see that a lot in both males and females, but autoimmunes affect women over men 10 to 1. And so, yes, it's also familial. Yes. So it definitely affects us, and they don't know it's idiopathic. They don't know why. Most likely it has something to do with our hormone cascade. And that's definitely tied to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in our brain that's running the show, and blood sugar handling, which also can affect an autoimmune. And I used to get a lot of hypoglycemia and hangry when I wasn't regulated. So that carb spike was doing that too, which was adding more insult to injury, because when you spike your blood sugar up and down, swings, bye-bye healthy tissue. If you have an autoimmune, that can cause an autoimmune flare just as much as eating gluten or eating the sugar that's causing inflammation. So those were big things that I noticed. And then also, I drank a ton of coffee. I mean, I lived for coffee. And I'm not against coffee if you can handle it, but coffee can also have an effect on people with autoimmune, because it can attach to T4 and T3, the hormones, and cause an autoimmune. There's studies on that, where your body starts attacking the hormone itself because of the coffee. You'd have to be tested to find that out. So big things for me were really standard American diet, but standard American diet, when you look at the food pyramid, at the bottom is all of this carbohydrates. I ate in that, I lived in that big, huge bottom. And soy milk, I drank a ton of soy milk. And I mean, and I pushed it because I'm really passionate about whatever I'm doing at the time. So, I mean, just like you see this passion now, the thing is that I live this passion now is completely different. So this is real passion, but before that wasn't fake passion. It was just that I believed in soy milk, and vanilla soy milk by Silk tasted delicious. And so I drank a ton of soy milk, and I realized now that was causing a huge estrogen issues for me, and probably one of the reasons why I wasn't able to lose weight. And also very deleterious, very difficult for your gut, very hard on the microbiome and also your gut lining. So there was a lot of issues with that, but I ate tons of tofu because I was probably semi-vegetarian vegan. And I'm not saying that is a bad way to be, because I don't want to knock that, but there's unhealthy, just as there's unhealthy meat eaters. I mean, the pendulum can swing both ways, because I also don't believe that you sit down to only ribeye steaks on your plate. I mean, I would love a ribeye steak, but I don't think you need one this big. Like, we can shrink that way down and be socially responsible and responsible with what we're doing in good animal husbandry, and not being wasteful and saying, I'm only going to eat the prime cuts and they've got to be this big. Because I think we can overconsume meat as well. So, but for me, to answer the question, because I know I can go off on tangents, and I'm sorry, but was a big thing was eating the grains. Grains are very, very hard on autoimmunes. For, I know that your listeners probably know that from other guests that you've had on. And I, went and listened to some of your podcasts that you have on. So I know that you're interviewing and seeing people talk the same thing. But grains are very, very hard because of the protein molecule in the grain. So corn, for example, is zein, or gluten is gliadin. So gliadin, the protein molecule in dairy, is casein. And so those are the three big culprits. And those protein molecules are what look like our healthy tissue when we have an autoimmune, and they create what's called a mimicry. And so those protein molecules go out into your bloodstream. Your body says those are foreign, builds up an antibody towards them, and then now they look just like your healthy tissue, and your body comes and attacks your healthy tissue. That's one of the ways that you can get an autoimmune. And once you have that antibody towards gluten or gliadin, people may lead you to believe, well, just heal your gut and that will go away. That is a misconception. Yes, you have to heal your gut with an autoimmune, but oftentimes I see people in practice that come and I run tests and there's nothing wrong with their gut. Me, on the other side, I had a lot wrong with my gut. So that was a huge part of my healing and putting my autoimmune, and I have more than Hashimoto's. I have several that never manifested. Is it okay if I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I worked with the practitioner, she ran some tests. I run these same tests on people, and the test is called Cyrex Array 5. You have to have a practitioner that's knowledgeable in running that, but that will look at all the different, it's a broad spectrum to look at all of your tissue. And then if you find something, you can go further down, kind of not a rabbit hole, but over in the weeds with that. So like if you found that you had antibodies towards your synapsin, which is what make your neurons talk to each other, then you would start doing more in-depth work as a practitioner to look at that person's brain, if they had an autoimmune of their brain. But nonetheless, this particular test showed that I had an antibodies towards my myelin sheath, but I didn't have an autoimmune manifested. So there are 3 phases of an autoimmune. There's the silent phase where you have the antibodies towards your healthy tissue, but you don't have any symptoms. Then there's the reactive phase where you have the antibodies towards your healthy tissue, but you start to have symptoms. And then there's the full-blown autoimmune. And unfortunately, our Western medicine model, and I'm not knocking Western medicine, because if I got my leg broken right now, I'd be over at the ER. So we can work together, this model. And I work with many practitioners. If somebody's seeing their doctor, and their doctor can talk to me, and I will provide information. And it's the best outcome for the person, which that's really what we want. But nonetheless, the Western medicine model doesn't diagnose an autoimmune until you have the full-on symptoms and the antibodies. And so let's use MS, because that's what antibodies towards your myelin sheath could lead to. You would have to have 70% damage before they diagnose you. Well, nobody wants to be here because now I'm debilitated. I'm in a wheelchair, or I have drop foot, or I have optic eye problems, or bladder problems, or all the things that MS leads to. I want to catch it back here, which is one of the things that when I found that information out, had it just been my thyroid, I might have snuck a pancake in there once in a while, but or my mom's homemade from scratch cinnamon rolls that I don't ever eat because I can't. I might have snuck one of those in at Christmas time when she makes everybody a pan of them. But because I knew that I had those antibodies towards my myelin sheath, that stopped me in my tracks, because at the time, like we already know, I was in my mid-30s, and I right now, most likely, had I not known what I know now, I would have probably ended up having symptoms. It would have manifested, and I put that into remission by this work. And I also say to people, which was one of the things you're saying, is that we are healthy from the inside and out. I say oftentimes to the people who work with me, and anybody that will actually listen, is my autoimmunes made me healthier. Being sick made me healthy because it made me take ownership of my health, and it made me investigate and be an active participant. And everybody's not going to go into this as a career, but nobody's going to care more about my health than me. Nobody's going to care more about your health than you. And so that was another big eye opener for me. Like, there was no magic pill. Somebody wasn't going to come along, and they could come along and guide me and help me. And thank God for this person that did have this, that walked along with me and had great knowledge and education and the wherewithal to take, because I have a strong personality, as much passion. I also have a strong personality. And, put me in my place by saying, could I be the doctor? But nonetheless, I had to take the full-on ownership. And that was another big thing within the nutrition. I had to make the choice to make sure that I went to the grocery store, bought all the things, found alternatives. And I know right now in this world, you can say I'm gluten intolerant or gluten free, and there's a million things that are gluten free things, but I don't eat grains as well. So I don't eat gluten free cookies if they're made with grains. So you still, but there's a lot of paleo type things out there that you can eat. When I did this, there was none. But in some ways, I think that's why I healed faster, because I wasn't trying to make imitation things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really had to just get really meat, fat, vegetables. And that's still what I say to people. And in fact, I have a list that I provide for my clients that has a list of meats, the list of fats, a list of spices, and a list of vegetables. And you can mix and match and pick one and say, here's make a meal. Because it also is very difficult when people start this type of eating, is to figure out, what am I going to eat? And I do see people, and I probably was as well, I can't remember that, but the first time this was probably ever told to me, I was in tears probably. And I see people, like yesterday I shared that I saw 11 people with you, and 2 of them were brand new, and they started to cry. Because there's a strong connection to what we eat on a daily basis, and it also can be very overwhelming. So that's one of the things I also remember about the nutrition, is that it was overwhelming on how am I going to do this and how am I going to succeed at this. But I knew that I needed to do it because of all the things I've shared that I was feeling. And then also these tests coming back saying you have antibodies towards your myelin sheath, you have some antibodies towards your heart tissue, you have some antibodies towards all these different things. And it was like, I didn't want this, and I didn't want the outcome of it. So,
yeah, I love that now we could do all these tests. And going back a little bit on what you said, I mean, you were feeling sick, you listened to what your body was telling you. You did went to the first step, you went to the doctor, they couldn't find anything, but you did not stop there. And I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to one's health, is that, as you mentioned, we respect Western medicine, and by all means, they have like great things that can offer in medicine. But sometimes if you don't have the exact symptom or what they're looking for, they might undiagnose something that could have be prevented before, and not when you already have autoimmune diseases or everything, it's like worse. So I feel like listening to the body, the symptoms, the pain that you're feeling. And I said it so many times, not every method of healing it's for everyone. You might you might be one of the lucky ones that goes to the internist, and right away the internist goes like, oh, look, this is what's happening, let's treat it with diet.
I think that's going to be rare, but
yeah.
I mean, and hopefully I wish that could happen for people, but oftentimes you hear the internist say, oh, those supplements aren't going to help you, or that diet isn't going to help you. And here's the other thing. You can also go to a functional medicine person, though, because I see people come into my office with bags of supplements, and it's like, this is not, it cannot be turned into test and put you on a bunch of supplements. Yeah. It really is about lifestyle. And that's a big thing that if you, that's the Krebs method. Dr. K, he wrote, Why is my thyroid? I can't remember. Why am I still having symptoms? Anyway, I take classes from him. So that is really his method, is addressing the lifestyle. And the huge component is diet. It's hydration, which I think is the fourth macro is hydration. Okay, so we have carbs, fat, protein, water. Pure water is the macro. But yes, I 100% agree. One thing I did want to say, though, is with going to Western medicine, and again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but the one piece is that they're not good at chronic issues.
Correct.
They're really good at acute. And so using the gut as an example, like if somebody comes, and I have a course that's called Energy RX, and right now we're taking the first group through. When I say we, I have an assistant, but really it's me, but I couldn't do it without her. So it's we. And when, so I look at that and say, well, what's the big reason why you don't have energy? And it really comes down to a stress response. And I call it the stress blueprint: emotional stress, dietary stress, and pain and hidden inflammation. But and that's like the number one thing that doctors hear, in addition to what people, especially from women, when you go to the doctor, it's, I have this and I'm fatigued. I have this and I'm fatigued. And so that's why I developed Energy RX, because I wanted to have a way that people could get, it's a course, it's an online course, but you also get live calls and you get an energy assessment from me. So it's not just I'm taking this course, you're also taking 321 multiple choice questions that look at your body systems. And then I assess that and tell you where you're imbalanced and what supplements and what diet and what you need. And then you go through and you're with a group doing this. But it's emotional stress, dietary stress, pain, hidden inflammation. And using that, like if you go to Western medicine, if you're not having diarrhea or vomiting or something of that nature, they're never going to think that you might have a hidden parasite that you picked up 5 years ago when you were in Mexico because you didn't have enough hydrochloric acid because you were drinking alcohol, because that gets rid of, and that's, I'm not saying people aren't going to do that, but that gets rid of, or that's one of the reasons why people have low stomach acid, and low stomach acid is equivalent to battery acid on a pH scale. So a parasite can't live in stomach acid. So its job is to digest our food, but it's also to bathe and disinfect our food. So now I've picked up this parasite. I got Montezuma's revenge when I was in, and I don't even want to just say Mexico, because I have people who've never left the country who have a parasite. Okay. So I don't want to pick on poor Mexico, because I love Mexico, but so I didn't mean to do that. But I'm just saying, if you went and did something and you picked up a parasite somehow, and then you got sick and you were acutely sick, but it passed, but now it's hidden within a biofilm and hiding from your immune system, but it's causing damage. That can be causing chronic fatigue. And if you go to the doctor and they're going to be like, and a big thing that they prescribe is exercise, go on a diet and exercise. Well, I'm chronically fatigued. Well, go on a diet and exercise. And the diet they're prescribing is standard American. So it's like this, because that's also contributing, that, as it did to me. And you don't even have to have an autoimmune to be chronic fatigued. I mean, I see a lot of people with chronic fatigue that then we start peeling the onion, so to speak, and getting to the bottom of why they're feeling the way they're feeling. And it's like the magic happens, and it happens within the work of it, and you have to want to do the work. You have to want to invest in yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the big change that I had to see, is that I had to want to invest in myself.
Yeah, I think as I was saying, like, just really listen to your body. And if
100%.
something is wrong, like if you're not feeling optimal, there's probably something that happening. It might not be like super major, but in the long run, it might turn into something major. So
Yes.
like if you're feeling like fatigue, or even like if you were not getting the enough nutrition, we can also start feeling depressed, like there's all these other kind of like side effects, emotional side effects, because of our bad nutrition. And so, yeah, if you're not feeling great, physical and mentally, and as you said, you're feeling fatigue for no reason, I mean, definitely there might be something there. And I think, I like to say, just listen to your body. If you're not super feeling in optimal health, then there might be something that will need a little work and a little help. And functional medicine, it's great for that. I love that you have shared with us like all the things that you do with your clients. And we talk about the 4 micros, which I think they're like super, super important. And you said we need carbs, we need fats, good fats. Protein. protein and water.
Yes.
Blank for a second. Yeah, and that's pretty much when I studied nutrition, instead of having this pyramid that the American diet has had for so long, which the carb is the bigger space for your food, I guess, and more of the functional medicine, and I'll say like modern nutritionist will tell you you could divide your plate in threes: carbs,
Mhm.
proteins, and fats, which is like the most it's like a better way to actually see your plate as opposed to in a pyramid. Can you tell us a little bit about the carbs? Because when you and me said carbs, we're not talking about a third of your plate with bread. We're talking
Right.
about what are some of the choices that we're actually talking about when we say carbs?
Well, I'm gonna say actually yesterday I saw a man and he's 77 years old and we ran a hair mineral test on him and he was a slow oxidizer. So I know you had somebody on your show that was talking about slow and fast oxidization and hair minerals that she healed with hair mineral. And I run a hair mineral on just about everybody that comes to see me because it's an excellent cost-effective test. And if you get a practitioner who knows how to read it. So slow oxidizers do better with carbohydrates. And so I said to him, okay, you're a slow oxidizer, you're going to do better with carbohydrates. And then started telling him that he couldn't have the brownies. And he said, well, you told me I would do better with carbohydrates. And I said, okay, now we need to talk about healthy carbohydrates. So we want carbohydrates that are unadulterated in their whole form. So that would be sweet potatoes, yams, even potatoes, if you can handle that, which autoimmunes oftentimes can't handle the potato. And a caveman with Paleolithic wouldn't have eaten potato because you couldn't eat it raw. And they didn't have access to fire. Even if we think they did, they didn't until later in a different part of the Paleolithic era. But nonetheless, potatoes would be okay as well. And then we want fruits and vegetables are also a form of carbohydrate. I mean, like a Brussels sprout has a higher carb content than say spinach. So oftentimes, like for myself personally, in the evening, I will kind of be craving a carb, but I like to carb taper throughout my day. And that's just my personal preference. I know there's all this intermittent fasting. I actually like to follow the circadian rhythm. So your cortisol is highest in the morning. So I would need more carbs because insulin is the reciprocal hormone of cortisol. So I want to help bring that down. So I eat more carbs in the morning and then as I follow the circadian rhythm, cortisol comes down at night, I eat less carbohydrates. Okay. So, and that's my personal preference. That's not for every person that works with me or that I see, but using Brussels sprouts as an example, I love to roast them in coconut oil. They're more dense and they have carbohydrate in them. And that isn't going to spike my blood sugar. So that has a lower glycemic load than even the sweet potato, even though that has fiber and I may put some almond butter on top of it. I love that. And that makes a complete protein as well. When you have the almond butter and the sweet potato or pumpkin seeds and sweet potato and you mix that makes a complete protein, similar to kind of a meat profile if you're trying to not eat as much meat, but you still want to be cognizant. So the carbohydrates with the sugar carbs, of course, there's a couple things we know that, well, maybe we don't, some listeners might not know that, but of course, when we eat processed carbs like brownies or Pop-Tarts or even bread, that has a high glycemic hit. And so that causes a blood sugar swing. And when we rapidly spike blood sugar, we rapidly drop blood sugar. And then our adrenals have to fire to get that blood sugar back up. And adrenals shouldn't be involved in the blood sugar cascade. It should be insulin and another hormone called glucagon
Mhm.
that are both secreted from the pancreas, but we want to kind of keep it roly-poly versus like a roller coaster, because you think what goes up must come down, right?
Mhm.
So those carbohydrates are different because of their fiber content, and is one of the main reasons, and for glycemic index. So we want to steer more towards the root-based vegetables for carbohydrates. The other thing is, and this is something that I encourage people who work with me to do, is to go and look not at the macro or the calories in carbohydrates, but to go and look at the mineral profile of carbohydrates. Okay, so like a cup of rice has like 50 grams of potassium in it, and a half of acorn squash has like 400 of potassium. Okay, milligrams, I'm sorry, not grams, 50 milligrams, 400 milligrams. We need 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. If you run hair minerals, and I've run thousands of hair minerals because I've seen, like I said, nearly 1,700 people, and I run a hair mineral on just about every person, and then I rerun hair minerals.
Mhm.
And if you see that, you can see people are potassium deficient, and the potassium sodium ratio is the vitality ratio. It's the most important ratio that we look at, really, because it tells us, I mean, there's many ratios significant ratios, but so those carbohydrates, that's a different thing that we're not really thinking about, is the micronutrients. We know the macros, but also the micros. And I don't want to bash counting macronutrients, because I've done it before, because I am also a competitive athlete. And I've had to count macros and eat a lot of calories and get all of that in. But one thing that I do see when I go on to like different social media groups that I belong to, I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want to sound like I'm bashing them, but people will be really like, okay, I hit all my macros today, but they're eating like a Pop-Tart and all these different things. And they're not looking at their micronutrients. And that's what I would encourage every person to do, is that get an app, not just an app that counts macronutrients, but an app. And there's one called Coronameter that you can get free, and also do the paid version. But even the free will tell you how much folate and B12 and A and C and all those different things that you've had throughout the day, and start counting your micronutrients. And where I want to go with that, in addition, with not just the potassium and the magnesium and those things, but also is to making ATP, the energy of your mitochondria. So your mitochondria, we know that this is metabolism, and we need to burn carbs, fat, and protein at the cell. And when we eat processed foods, they don't come with their own set of nutrients to help run what's called the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is what's making ATP. And so if we keep eating processed foods, in order to take carbohydrates, pyruvate and lactate and all of the fat, carbs, protein turn into a different form, and then they have to go through this Krebs cycle to make energy. We make 36 energy, okay, 36 grams of energy, I guess. And what we need is nutrients, a lot of B vitamins in that Krebs cycle. And if we eat processed foods, like pure table sugar has no nutrients in it, but honey has those nutrients. Maple syrup comes with those nutrients. And so if we eat a yam over a cup of rice, yes, we could eat the same amount of carb, but will they come with their own nutrients to run the Krebs cycle? And that's how we start becoming deficient in the micronutrients, because if we're eating the white things, okay, those white carbs and all of those things need to steal those nutrients from someplace. And that's where we start getting depleted, because you make an ATP your weight every day. That's how much ATP every person makes. So you have to have the the carbs, fat, protein to come in to do that, but you also have to have the nutrients to make that happen and turn that Krebs cycle to make that ATP to fuel your organs and make as much ATP as you need, however much you weigh. And if you're eating void foods, that's when you start getting sluggish and fatigue. Magnesium is a huge one. B vitamins are a huge one. And CoQ10 is another one. So I run a lot of also organic acid tests where I look at people's Krebs cycle and their mitochondria and see where they're deficient. And some people aren't able to, for example, turn fat into the usable form. So they might need some L-carnitine, but some people aren't able to turn carbohydrates properly, the lactate. So then they need some CoQ10 or some B1, 2, 3. They need chromium. They need those things, but we definitely need, and magnesium. We need lots of magnesium, and magnesium will be stolen from our supply if we're eating these processed foods, which that's a lot to look at, but it's blood sugar, it's micronutrients, and the macronutrient. So when we look at carbs, so not all carbs are, created equal.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that, because I think, and also even with the people that quote unquote, they're trying to eat healthy and they're trying to go gluten-free, but they still want to like eat all these, they cannot eat bread, but then they eat all these substitute bread that it has a lot of fillers. It has like a lot of quote unquote natural stuff that they're putting into these things. But then at the end of the day, you're eating all these carbs that are that the nutritional value, it's so low. So
it's zero actually, and it's
or zero,
right, and it's robbing your stores, and all of your cells need that. Every cell that's making, especially your heart, has the most mitochondria, but you can't detox without mitochondria. You can't make neurotransmitters. You can't, run your heart, your organs, everything needs mitochondria to make that ATP in the Krebs cycle, and it needs the nutrients along with the macronutrients, and that is our metabolism. And then I touched a little bit on that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of hijacking you to just my mind, but so the thyroid hormone runs that, but in order for the thyroid hormone to be synergized at the cell, it needs potassium. And where I already mentioned, we need, and you might go online and Google and say, well, Dr. Google tells me I only need 2,700 milligrams. Right. But if you're already deficient, it's like I'm using this. I have a Guinness glass, but this is water. Okay. If I'm filling this full of water and this is how much I need every day, but I'm empty down to here, I've got to fill the glass and then keep it full. So you're going to need more. And most people are deficient, 90% of Americans for sure. And I'm guessing, many Western cultures for sure, because of the processed foods that we have access to. And again, like you're saying, Alex, is that if I substitute this gluten-free cookie or for the cookie, it's still, I don't want to call it garbage, but it's still subpar.
I will call that for you. Okay.
Okay.
Sometimes, we gotta like really, it's one of those things that we want to be healthy, but we still want to eat all this crap food. It's like, by all means, if you want to eat cake and cookies and everything that makes you happy, go ahead. But know that, and it's just me telling you or you telling them, it's facts. At the end of your life, you're not going to be living an optimal health, which that's what we all want. We all want to be freaking 70 years old, 80 years old, and still feeling good, have really good muscle volume, have really good bone density, have a really good gut to eat most of the things that we want. But that comes to a cost. And I think that's what we are trying to say here. Like, you really have to be conscious of like, how do I want to live my life? Do I want
Absolutely. 100%. I will just lend into that. My mom is not going to be 91 and she still lives alone.
That's awesome.
Yes. And she still 100% takes care of herself and she's healthy. And I know it's because she eats, I mean, she doesn't eat exactly like I do. And she still, like I said, she makes the cinnamon rolls and all of these things,
Yeah.
but she is healthy. And I'm not saying she sits and eats that constantly, even though she's awesome at making these things, but she is healthy. And I do think that it's her generation, because they came through a different time period, obviously, and they didn't have access. And they also, our life is very fast. And I want to just digress to one of the things you said. What was another thing that really woke you up when you had to change? Was that my life was also very fast. I mean, the dichotomy between living in New York City versus in a small town in Wisconsin is like black and white. Yeah. And night and day. But my life slowed down. I really wanted to get back to the West Coast, and I still do, a big, huge part of me. But even Seattle to New York, because I lived in Seattle as well, to New York is still a massive difference. But going to a smaller town, and you don't have to go to a smaller town, you can definitely do this even if you're living in a larger city. But is a big movement was the slow food movement, and starting to cook yourself, starting to ferment yourself, properly preparing your food by soaking and sprouting. If you are eating nuts and seeds and grains, that you're still soaking and sprouting so that you get rid of that phytic acid, so that it's not anti-nutrient, because it makes it so you can't absorb your minerals. Even nuts and seeds, pulses, all these different things. But we're in that because, which is why carbs became dominant for many of us, is because it was quick. It was quick, but it's also quick energy. It's the kindling, and we need to move to the log. And the log is the protein and fat. It's really the fat. Yeah. And so we need to kind of slow that down. But how do we do it? Is we have to prepare. Yeah. If you're going to embrace this lifestyle, you have to prepare. You have to make a decision that you're going to shop, you're going to cook, you're going to meal prep, you're going to go find recipes. If you want to have a sweet, you're going to find a way to make your own sweet. My strong suggestion would be to do it for 30 strict days and give up all sweets and processed foods, because your taste buds will change. Yes. 100%. And you'll start, pretty soon a sweet potato will taste sweet to you versus it tastes like candy. But you have to get the other things out of your diet.
Yeah, for sure. And so we have to talk about carbs and the good carbs. So pretty much we have said that carbs are pretty much fruits and vegetables. And root vegetables, pretty much all the spectrum of vegetables and fruits. Those are the carbs that we're talking about when we're talking about these three things on your plate, which we said carbs, proteins, and fats. Those are the good carbs that we're talking about and that you really need on your diet. Let's move a little bit to the fats, because I know that's a big one. Because I'm not sure about you, but when I tell also my clients, like, you gotta incorporate good fats, people are always like, what do you mean fats? Like, what is that? What are those good fats? Tell us a little bit about what are those good fats and why.
Well, there's many reasons why. I just gave a whole talk on this to my class on Wednesday night, and it was, one of the women said, "Oh, that was thick." So
briefly,
good, yes, good thick talk. So, healthy fats. First of all, many people have this belief that canola oil is healthy because we're told that it's healthy.
Yes.
But what I want, before you even think about, well, why is it unhealthy, or, where does a canola oil come from? Because if I said to you, where does olive oil come from? An olive. Where does almond oil come from? An almond. Where does avocado oil come from? An avocado. Where does butter come from? a cow. So you can start naming these single, but when I say canola oil, it's like, well, where does it come from? A canola? It comes from a rapeseed, and it's high processed in order to get that. And when you think vegetable oil, we don't really consider vegetables oily. I mean, an olive, okay, but I'm saying for the most part, we don't consider them oily. So it's a high chemical process, and in that it's denatured, but your body isn't able to recognize these fats. And every cell in your body is made out of what's called a phospholipid layer. And if you don't have the right types of fats, your body can't process this. Also, when we bring fats in to our small intestine, the small intestine puts out a hormone called cholecystokinin, CCK, and CCK goes up and tells the gallbladder to release bile. And bile is the river of toxins. That's the runoff from your liver doing what it needed to do to detox you, and stores that river of toxins, and that breaks down. But when your body then breaks that down, outside of things like coconut oil, which is a healthy fat, your body then has to bring that fat through the lymph. That's how it's brought around. And the largest lymph is the gult, which is in between the small and large intestine in the gut. And so that is how it's absorbed and brought through, not through the bloodstream, it's through the lymph. And so when we bring in these fake fats that are highly processed, we're bogging down our detox system, which is our lymph system, and our gallbladder, and our body doesn't know what to do with it. And then we're also supplying the wrong type of fat to make every cell in your body. It takes 90 days to replace all of your cells. Somewhere in there, you have what's called apoptosis. That's one of the reasons why we also need to fast. And I suggest people stop eating at 7 p.m. at night, because we need that time to fast. So our body's not focusing on digesting, it's focusing on detoxing. And then we can go through that apoptosis. That's one of the other things that intermittent fasting. But getting back to the fats, those are the things that why we kind of don't want to eat bad fats. And then the good fats are coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, but I'm going to say that there's bad olive oils out there, and you really have to know what you're getting. Plastic bottles underneath fluorescent lights at the grocery store, those aren't great olive oils. Go for the ones in the glass dark jars or the glass jars. And not always, but go for ones from Italy, Spain, Portugal. People say, but where can I get them? TJ Maxx, Aldi. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to be plugging that, but they have great olive oils. You never know what one you're going to get. So you might love one and then go back and it's gone, but they have like dark bottles from, from like Portugal and all kinds of different olive oils if you're going to get them. But olive oils, generally you can get some high smoke point olive oils, but for the most part, they're not cooking oils. Those are drizzle oils. Those are oils for dipping and tasting. You want to have the higher saturated type fats for cooking that have a high smoke point. And that's going to be like coconut oil, avocado oil, but it's also going to be animal fats, lard, tallow, lard from from pigs, tallow from cows, schmaltz from chickens. Those are going to have a very high smoke point, and they're also taste delicious. And then one thing I want to say is that you want to get them from pastured animals if possible. So you want to become friends with your local farmer. But when you have a cow or a hog or a chicken or anything that's out in the yard, and so that would be pasture raised, they're getting vitamin D from the sun. And vitamin D is stored in their fat. And so 1 little teaspoon, and I'm using the end of my pinky because that's kind of the size of a teaspoon, has 500 IUs of vitamin D in it in a pasture raised animal on average. And so if you can get that, that helps you supply your vitamin D. And we hear all the time that we're low and deficient in vitamin D, and people say it's because we don't get enough sun, which is probably true because, you know, everybody's afraid of wrinkling and putting all this sunscreen on themselves, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
And some people need to, like, I'm very fair, so I do need to be protective. I wear a hat, but I still try and get some sun, especially morning sun. I try to get that first sunlight. But when you look at the deficiency, I'm saying in the nutritional cascade, is we brought our animals into the factory and we gave up getting them their own sun to load their fat up. And then restaurants and things of that nature, I'm sorry, that will stop in like 2 seconds, I hope.
No worries.
Okay, so restaurants and things of that nature were told by the Food and Drug Administration that you couldn't any longer use lard to cook. And okay, I'm going to bring up Mexican again, but when I go to a Mexican restaurant, because they are notorious for cooking with lard, and I will ask them, I have one in my city that I love to go to, and I will ask them, can you cook my fajita dish in the lard? And they're like, even sometimes the cook comes out and is like, really, nobody ever wants this? And it's like, yes, I want that. And you can ask for things like that too. Like if you go someplace to eat and let's say you're going to have an omelet, ask them to crack the eggs instead of using a batter or a pre-made mixture, because that's also kind of fake. You want the real thing, and ask them to cook the omelet in butter.
Mm-hmm.
Because that gets rid of that canola oil. So you still can go out to eat. You just have to be bold and ask ask for them to do things. And oftentimes they want to accommodate you.
Mm-hmm.
And the chef usually knows this. I mean, if they're a chef with their salt, right, they know this stuff. So they definitely want to, they want to use these fats too. It's fun for them, because they're kind of forced into this arena because they have to, because of the legality of it. So, but the fats also know, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but like using lard, for example, and you might know this, and so jump in and tell me if you do, but the percentage of, like, we think lard is saturated fat, but really lard is like 45% unsaturated fat. It's not, the whole cascade of it is not completely saturated. It does have polyunsaturated fat in lard. So animal fats are not completely like, oh, I've got to eat all this saturated fat. But then the other reason why we want to bring in these different fats, and we want the whole spectrum of fats, mono, poly, unsaturated, saturated, we want the whole spectrum, because our cell fluidity or rigidity of it needs that, and the body knows where to put it. You know, it's we're innate intelligence, where our body knows what to do with it. Thank goodness, because can you imagine if you had to direct all that? Yes, because we don't, right? But also one thing people don't talk about necessarily is, of course, fats taste wonderful, but also is our ability to inflame and deflame. And we need, there's what's called a prostaglandin, and it's our ability. So we have two ways to deflame and one way to inflame. And if we take too much sugar in, we can hijack that in the body, and insulin will take our ability to make our deflame prostaglandin and hijack it and put it into the inflammatory process. But we need the cascade of omega-3s and 6s in order to make inflammation and anti-inflammatory processes, or the plant prostaglandins is what they're called. And many people hear inflammation, and it's like, no, inflammation is a healthy part of the healing process. We need to inflame. But we need to be able to inflame and then deflame, not inflame and stay inflamed. And so consequently, we're as a whole, Western nations are inflamed. And why is because we've gotten rid of omega-3s. We're not eating wild caught fish, and we're not eating wild or grass-fed animals. And so our omega-3 to 6 ratio is off, where it should be ideally 1-to-1 or 4-to-1, 6-to-3. And we as Americans are 15-to-20-to-1. So we're walking around inflamed. And of course, inflammation leads to oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is, all of that is the root of disease. And you can name any disease, arthritis, cancer, autoimmunes, it's inflammation. And so, in order to live longevity and have good feeling joints and everything else, we need to get omega-3s in, and ideally through our diet and through eating some fish. And you want to stay away from the large fish. You want to eat the smaller fish, sardines, mackerel, things like that, salmon, but line caught salmon versus wild line caught salmon versus farm salmon. So those are the reasons why we want to get healthy fats into our diet. Our cells need them. Our immune system needs it. It tastes great. We need to elicit that response from the gallbladder. I already said I did ultrasounds. I can't tell you how many people, and of course I'm in the 80s. I came through the 80s. So I came through that fat-free eating. I was eating licorice constantly because it was fat-free, low fat, and I was all about the low fat. And licorice is loaded with high fructose corn syrup and gluten. That's the number one listed ingredients in licorice. And I was eating a bag a day probably. There's another thing that was a big change. Okay, so fat, we need healthy fats.
Yeah, including also like one good one that I recommend too. It's avocados. Whoever,
absolutely,
if you're able to get avocados, by all means, they have a lot of good fats. I know for certain diets, they don't eat nuts. What's your intake on nuts? Because they do also have good fats.
I think that nuts, if you can handle them and you don't have an autoimmune, or you have an autoimmune that's not affected by them, of course, you would do one or two things. You would definitely want to, if you can get tested and find out if you have an antibody towards the nuts and seeds. I think that it can become in a Paleolithic, which I've mentioned many times, or a ancestral health type diet, because when we start doing those types of things or eating this way, all of a sudden almond flour becomes like a mainstay for making sweets. So I think that we need to be cognizant that our DNA hasn't changed from that of a caveman. And if a caveman were to eat nuts, it wouldn't be come in a bag shelled. They would get the nut and they would have to find a way to crack the nut and work hard. And I'll tell you, if you had to go out and do that every time you were going to eat some almonds, you'd be like, okay, I'm done with these 10 and this was great. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to forage and get something else. So do I think nuts and seeds are great? Yes, I think that they need to be a limit. They're loaded with good omega-6, but omega-6 can also drive that pro-inflammatory chain. So we need to be a little careful of that. And then I mentioned that already as well, which is not necessarily that I'm talking the oil here, but I'm talking the phytic acid. So nuts, seeds, legumes, grains have phytic acid in them. And in order to get rid of that, you need to soak and sprout. And so you would want to get raw whole almonds, for example, if you're going to eat that, or cashews. Well, cashews really aren't a nut, they're a legume. But if you were going to get them, and I would stay away from peanuts, steer clear, because they have mycotoxins and also known carcinogens. So they're oftentimes molded, but you can't see the mold. But nuts, back to that you would want to soak and sprout them. And a good place to learn that is, I might have that on my website, a blog on that. I can't remember because there's a lot of different blog posts on there, but also is Weston A. Price. And if you go and put Phytic, Phytic, Phytic acid in to Weston A. Price's search engine, they'll come up with a plethora of articles and ways to soak and sprout. And try it. Once you have especially a walnut that is soaked and sprouted, and then you take and dehydrate it yourself, that compared to walnuts that you're just eating out of the bag that haven't had that done, you'll be like, oh my goodness, why didn't anybody ever introduce me to this before? But of course it's time consuming and it's not lost on me, but that's part of the slow lifestyle. But honestly, once you get the hang of it, it's like a big bowl, dump the nuts in, put some apple cider vinegar, fill it up with water, put a towel over it, keep it in a warm spot for however many hours each one has their own set of time, strain them, drain them, go and get yourself a food dehydrator, lie them out, plug it in, and let it go to town, and you can go to work and have them. But so, yeah, I'm a proponent of eating nuts and seeds. I also eat nuts and seeds, but again, I work with many people who cannot. And if they have an autoimmune, and I see a lot of autoimmune people that come to me, if I put them on paleo autoimmune, I have them remove it for a time. And then we either reintroduce and see how they feel, or we reintroduce for some time and then we run an antibody test to see if they have antibodies towards those nuts and seeds. Because here's the other thing, I just want to digress. If you're on a paleo autoimmune diet, there's still things that you could have antibodies to. For example, if you are allergic to latex, you could have antibodies towards also avocados, although we're proponents of avocados. So that there's no perfect list for anybody. It's your bio individual. But if you can't afford these tests, and they are expensive or costly, and because you need the test and the practitioner to help you with it, then just start with eliminating it for some time and then reintroduce it and rotate it through and see what it makes you feel like. But if you know you're okay with it, then dabble off into this soaking and sprouting and getting the most nutrition. And and I think I said this, but phytic acid, again, binds with minerals so that we can't absorb them. So it makes it an anti-nutrient. And that's the downfall of that phytic or phytates that are in the food, is it becomes anti-nutrient, because the very thing we need as minerals are the spark plugs. Okay.
No, yeah, that's all amazing. And I'm glad that you touch on all those points. And as you said, some people can't really eat avocado. I'm actually one of those persons. And
I actually can't either. I used to get very sick from them because I lack the enzyme to digest. Is that the same for you, or do you have antibodies towards them?
I actually never got tested. I did an elimination diet, and that's how I find out. Because I'm originally from LA, from California, and so we get an abundance of avocados.
Sure.
Most of the year. So I will literally eat an avocado or two a day for many, many years. But then I realized that I was feeling not okay.
Right.
Like my body was telling me, like, well, I know I'm not sick, but I don't feel okay. So and that was at the beginning, but later on it started affecting me on my digestion. And so I was like, what is it? And me and my practitioner same, like, work together and all that. And at the end of the whole elimination diet and trying different things, avocado, nuts, and bananas were just not great for me.
Yeah, and you might have a latex allergy, and that's a very prevalent in rheumatoid arthritis people. Those things, oftentimes they have a difficult time with these things, and tomatoes. So it happens to be avocados, tomatoes, and they're not necessarily related, but they have it, or nightshades. So avocados definitely, for me, when I first ever ate an avocado, I was like in my early 20s. I mean, again, I'm from Wisconsin, so we didn't have abundance of avocados here. And my sister made up some guacamole, and I'd gone to her house to eat. And we just like chow hounded this guacamole down with some corn chips. And then we were going to go horseback riding. And I felt like someone had taken their fist and punched me right underneath my ribs like a ball of fire, and I was in
Wow.
pain. And then she lived rural, and she's like, do you want me to take you to the hospital? And at the time I did ultrasounds, and I'm like, no, because they'll have to call in the mobile sonographer to do the ultrasound, and I know I don't have gallstones, so I don't know what this is. But anyway, I discovered, and then another time I ate it again, and it same thing. I just lacked the enzyme to break down the avocado. Now since healing, and actually almonds would kind of do the same thing to me. Now since healing, I don't have that issue anymore, but I don't want it back. So once you're sick on something, you kind of don't love it. So I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And but yeah, just, you know, for people to know out there that sometimes you know, items, you know, like vegetables and nuts and all that, they are healthy. However, they might not be good with your body. Like
Right.
you might, you know, like me, I mean, I love bananas and I love avocados, but I can't eat them because it will really mess me up. And then I will not feel optimal. Like I will not feel good for the day.
And
So,
is it the same for you with plantains?
you know what? I stopped eating bananas and avocados for now. It's been like 5 years, I think.
Okay.
And I don't have the craving for it. I think once I stopped, and I think just my body was like, "Oh, I don't want them. I don't want them anymore." And I haven't really introduced them back. I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah. I mean,
felt the need.
your innate intelligence is saying no.
Yeah, like before, even when I had the pains, I would just eat them. I never cared. I will just like eat it all the time. I mean, I love bananas, but then once I stopped eating them, like consciously, like let me see what's really causing this. I feel so much better at night at them. So now I see a banana because, you know, I have bananas all the time, either for my mom or whoever's in the house, and they're eating all the time. But now I look at them and I'm like, no, I don't want them. I look at the avocados and same thing, like, nah, I'm good. And with the nuts, I do love nuts. So here and there, I will now introduce nuts. I will eat nuts. But it's like what you said, is like we have to have some sort of balance, especially with nuts, because we get like a 2-3 pound bag with all these nuts. But in reality, it's like, come on, like you said, you wouldn't go on the trees and get all these 3 pounds and eat them yourself.
Right. You wouldn't be walking around with bags of them. It would be it would be very laborious to crack open even 10.
Yeah.
You'd probably be swearing.
Yeah, exactly. No way. No. So yeah, I just eat like, you know, 3, 4, 5, maybe like 10 is just like a lot of them. Now I'm very mindful of the amount of those that I eat. And finally touching back on our little food plate that we're talking about, and we're going with the carbs. We already know what the carbs are, the good carbs that people should be eating. We talk about the good fats that we should be trying and eating and mixing up with our carbs. And we also touch a little bit on the proteins.
Okay, so proteins. Well, protein, like I said, I wasn't a huge proponent when I started, and now I mean, of course, this is years ago, and I explained all the reasons why. So proteins, of course, there's good and bad. Already touched on factory raised farm feedlot animals. Sometimes that is the only thing people can afford, and I understand that. And so I would say if you're going to eat conventionally raised cows, for example, still be mindful of the amount of meat that you're eating. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't eat meat, because I'm going to say that's the stool. And we need amino acids, which is the breakdown of the protein. Is we need amino acids. We need amino acids to run the neurotransmitters, the Krebs cycle. I actually do a lot of amino acid therapy where like people will have, from stress, they will blow through their what's called amino acid called glycine, and you need glycine and taurine to make bile. And they'll come to me because they can't digest But once we start getting into the depth of it, I find out that it's because of stress and they burn through their glycine. And again, I run a test to find this out. And it's looking at it from the protein portion, because you need all of these different amino acids, essential and non-essential. And essential means you can't make them, so you have to eat them. And non-essential means your body can make it. So you have all this protein cascade, but if you're going to eat conventional, to finish off that statement, be cognizant, one, that you're still eating healthy fats. And like you said, the plate's divided in threes. It depends on your individual need and what you're doing. Right. So that might change, and you would know that. But if you're just trying to get a real general where to start,
idea.
Yes, it would be kind of like a 30-30-40. So 30 fat, 30 carb, or 30 protein, 40 carbs, or you could switch that protein carb. Okay. But if you're going to eat conventional, go for the leaner cuts, because farm raised versus feedlot raised, factory raised, when they put animals, I'm going to use a cow. Cows chewed their cud. If they can't regurgitate and chew their cud, they can't properly digest. If you feed them corn, they can't chew that as cud. They can do that with grass. They can't do it with corn. Corn now is hot. Just like corn is inflammatory to us and hot to us, it's inflammatory to them. Then we could get into the whole GMO, that they're eating GMO corn, which is a whole nother.
You'll come back for that.
That's another podcast, right? So we're on just eating the corn. So the corn is hot. And then in addition, they're giving them hormones because they want to shorten the time to market. And if you want to make somebody fat, give them hormones and grains, because that's how you fatten up chickens, pigs, cows. And that's what the industry has learned. But then because of this, they're hot and they're inflamed. So they give them antibiotics. And the antibiotics and all of this toxin gets stored in the fat, just like our toxins get stored in our fat, because our body wants to wall it away from our healthy tissue and our healthy organs, and to keep us healthy. And so if we're eating sirloin from a conventionally raised cow, that's going to be leaner versus a ribeye from a grass-fed cow, because that's going to have good healthy fat, which is actually going to also be loaded with conjugated linoleic acid and some omegas. I mean, the grass-fed cow could almost be like eating salmon in its fat profile. So that would be one of the things with proteins. But then the building blocks of proteins, I mean, proteins have so many functions in our body. I mean, almost everything in your body needs amino acids to run. I mean, neurotransmitters need amino acids and B vitamins and minerals to make serotonin, dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine, epinephrine. Your hormones need it. Your muscles need it. Your muscle tissue. Again, when we take these amino acids, where I already talked about, making the bile is taurine and glycine. Those are amino acids. Or making glutathione comes from cysteine. That's the master antioxidant in the body. We can't make it unless we have the amino acids. And of course, we also need the stomach acid to break down the amino acids and the polypeptide chains that come out of the proteins. So I am more of a proponent of trying to get line caught, grass-fed, grain-free. Hug your farmer, get to know your local
yes,
farmer.
Please.
Yes. Farmers markets, oftentimes they're there at the farmers market. It's not just people growing vegetables, it's people bringing honey. I mean, I know that's not the protein, but bringing their own honey and bringing their own maple syrup and bringing their own beef and their own chickens and everything like that.
Eggs and all that.
Eggs and eggs are like I can't eat eggs, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Eggs are like a NutriBullet. I mean, they're like everything right there. They're loaded with vitamins, minerals, they're loaded with choline, they're loaded with the fat, the protein profile, it's like perfect. And then when you are eating protein, because somehow we have it, not all of us, but it's kind of seems like it's a little ubiquitous that we want only white meat and really lean chicken, but we need the fat to better absorb and digest the protein. So that's also why an egg is perfect. And if you can say, but I don't like dark meat, I also encourage people, go and buy a whole chicken and roast it yourself. It's less expensive. You'll learn more about the bird itself, I mean, or cooking, I mean, and the whole process of it, and appreciating the whole bird, the whole animal. I also want to just kind of stick in there. You probably saw my dog, and I mentioned my dog here because you saw her in the background maybe a little bit, but she eats paleo herself. So I don't feed her dog food. I feed her what I eat. And it works out well for us, but I oftentimes get a chicken and I put it in the crock pot, and to get the most out of it, I add water and boil it so that it's cooking there 4 hours or something, and I get the bone broth from it. And then she has freeze-dried vegetables, so I use that bone broth to reconstitute her freeze-dried vegetables, but I too will drink that because it's very medicinal to our gut lining. L-glutamate is what our gut lining uses, and if we are inflamed and your doctor runs a C-reactive protein test, that C-reactive protein is looking at how your body is breaking down protein, because in an inflammatory state, your body will put out cortisol to put out the fire of the inflammation, but that is catabolic, and the first thing it goes after is the gut lining, which is L-glutamate. And so by drinking and taking in these amino acids from meat broth, it's not so much bone broth, because some people can't handle bone broth right away, they need meat broth. That chicken you can get a lot out of a chicken is what I'm trying to say. So if you go and buy like a whole organic free range chicken, you might go, holy buckets, that's a little sticker shock, especially right now because meat prices have kind of gone up.
Right.
Not kind of, they have. And so, we want to try and get the most out of the product that we're purchasing. And so that's one way to really stretch that, because that bone broth or broth from your chicken is also going to have an amino acid profile, and it's very medicinal for your GI tract. And our grandmothers would have done that, or our great grandmothers would have done that. That's how they stayed healthy. They were fermenting their own foods, and they were making lots of soups and stews. And even if they were making bread, they were making their own, and they were probably fermenting, and the grains were different as well than what we're using. We use dwarf wheat where they used Icon wheat. So that's changed as well. But so protein, I think I've covered a lot of things on protein, but so I mean, one thing I also want to say is this, and this kind of just, this is just by my observation. If you go and look at, like, for example, okay, I was on the United States Kettlebell team, just try and keep that brief. And I was way under eating, even though I was doing what I was doing. This was in 2018. And I just couldn't put on the muscle. And so I hired a guy that did this for a living, even though I am a nutritional background, because I just couldn't get it into my own head. And he looked at my calorie intake and looked at what I was doing for output and said, if you're not going to go up in calories, you're just not going to go anywhere with this. And so my calories increased by 1,000, and I literally was eating 240 grams of protein a day. And I like leaned out and got strong. And then if you go and look at, like, some ketogenic diets are high fat, but if you look at keto gains where they're trying to gain muscle at the same time as lean out, that's a high proponent of protein. And if you start to look at, like, the carnivore diet and all these different things, we sometimes really don't, most women and some men don't eat enough protein. We're way under protein. So a kind of a rule of thumb is 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And if you start, and that's a lot. And if you start doing that, but you need to break that down into smaller meals. And even if you said, okay, I can't do that, start with 0.5 even. And if you said, okay, I'm not going to do it based on if I'm overweight or carrying excess, then do it, find out, go measure yourself, and you can find body fat calculators where you enter in your neck, your waist, and your hips and find out your body fat percentage. Take that away, that amount of pounds or kilograms away from your current body weight, find out your lean mass. It's going to be a rough estimate, and take that by 0.7 or 1. And at least be fueling your lean tissue with the amount of protein. Now, I know 240 grams, and I don't eat that now. That is a lot. But know too that I was competing internationally, and it's practically like going to the Olympics. I mean, we wear the whole garb, everything, and there's 1,500 athletes and 68 countries represented. And I was in Latvia that year, and you have to make the team, and I was training like 2-3 hours a day, 6 days a week. So I needed the protein to help build the muscle.
Exactly.
And to recover and repair, because I was really tearing myself down. But yeah, protein is the stool, and I do think we're under proteined, but I think that we need to be responsible where we're resourcing this protein from. So it shouldn't just be conventional or grass-fed, the prime cuts. People are afraid of this. I don't like liver, but like tongue, once I had the cow tongue, it was like, okay, I don't want to look at it. And I'm just going to cut it up. Somebody made it for me, and I was like, I don't, but it actually tasted good. And then once I started doing that, it's like, and when I get the cow, a lot of people don't want that. So they give that part to me, and it's not a part of what I'm paying for because nobody wants it. So I get all of that. And if I'm not the heart, the lungs, the liver, I'm not the lungs, the heart, the tongue, the liver, all of that. But guess what? My dog loves it. So I'm using it. But it's also nutritious. It's very nutritious.
My background, my parents are from Mexico. So when we eat an animal, whatever animal we're eating, I think it almost goes to our old traditions. When we will get by an animal, we will actually eat the whole thing. We will use the whole thing. And I like that you touch on that if you're gonna buy something, get the most out of your money, use everything, because you can really use everything. And so at home, my grandma, my grandparents will use the tongue. I love liver.
I mean, I wish I loved it. I don't know why I don't, but what I do is cut it up and freeze it in little capsules and take a couple of the liver capsules. And my dog likes it, like I said. So, but yes, and I know too, like in your culture that, like, don't you give the chicken feet to babies to like teeth?
Yes, that's one of the things that we do. And also for a pregnant woman, we cook the chicken feet, the chicken feet, and we do like some sort of soup because it has a lot of collagen and a lot of like good things. So we almost cook all of it until they're like almost dissolving. They're like so soft that you could eat the whole thing. So yeah, like almost like going back to those basics, get to know your farmer, go to the farmer's market, know where your food comes from. I think that's like a big thing now. And I know as an experience, I mean, I lived in a big city. I mean, LA, it's one of the biggest cities in the world.
Sure.
And obviously there we don't have, the farmer. Like we can't really go to the ranch and buy like a piece of meat or get to know the farmers, but there's a lot of people there that are trying to do like a really good job in those little farmers markets. So definitely one cool thing about LA is that it's bringing more and more local farmers to actually share what they do, and and not just with vegetables, but like with dairy and meat and all that. So if you really, really want to make a change in your life, want to like, you know, have a good life and know where your food comes from, take the time. Take the time to go where your veggies are grown. You know, see the few farmers that are close to you. So those are like some of the good things that people can do to improve their eating habits and just their life in general.
And it's also cost effective, and you're supporting your own economy and also decreasing our carbon footprint, because when all of these vegetables and everything are come in, they're shipped and or driven, and so you're decreasing that. And then my other thing is start your own garden, even if you live in an apartment. When I lived in Manhattan, I had an apartment, I redid the whole roof. And when I first moved into the apartment, it was nothing but rubble up on the roof. And here we were on the river, and it was just nothing but rubble up there. And so I ended up being on the board and the president of the board of the building. But before that, I went to the president of the board, and they gave me $500. And so I recruited this guy that I met that was from Big Mike, is this big, like 6'9" guy that came and helped me. And I went and got dirt from New Jersey, and I had to use that to get the soil, the plants, everything. And then my friend and her kids helped grow the plants in the apartment. We were like starting them from seeds, but I started growing gardens, and then I would make it community. So I know that you can do it, because if I can do it in Manhattan,
yes,
you can do it. And you can do it even if you have an apartment and just have a little balcony and just start pots, but start growing some of your own food just to get yourself hands in the dirt and around it, and the culture of it for yourself, and talking with people and joining groups. And also it's cost effective, and there's nothing that tastes as good as when you're growing your own tomatoes, because it's like, I grew this. And it's exciting, and it's also decreasing our carbon footprint, which we really obviously need to be cognizant of
everything. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, we have give you so many good tips today, and I'm super excited about that. Before we go, is there something that you would like to share with us when it comes to these three major things that we talk about, which was like our carbs, our proteins, and our good fats, that we should be thinking about it, and the way we should be thinking about it?
I would for sure, I guess I would say we've covered a lot of ways to think about it, but one of the things is, if this is new to you, that I always suggest to people with anything is, you have to decide if you're a wade in this pool slowly or a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person. So I'm like diving in the deep end or ripping the Band-Aid off. Like, I want to be all or nothing. Yes. But some people, that's not for them. So then what I suggest is that start with one meal, and maybe it's going to be dinner, because your mornings are hectic and you're out for lunch at work, or you're brown bagging it, or you're salading it, or doing something, you're going to the deli or wherever you're going. I hope you're not driving through Little Caesars, but but if you are, you can keep that to start with dinner or breakfast or whatever's the easiest for you, but Mac Daddy that out, like become a rock star at dinners. And so you could say, let's just say you're going to adopt, and it doesn't have to be paleo, happens to be just like, you can, on the internet, you can't swing a baseball bat if you type paleo in and not hit somebody's blog that has a recipe. So you could start out with easy paleo or easy ancestral health, something of that nature, and say, okay, I'm going to do this Now, eventually I would suggest that you stick the stake in the ground and do full 30 days and not go deviate at all, because you're not going to really know the benefits. And if you can, go 45 to 60, but really 30. Okay. But let's say you're wading into the pool. So week 1 is just dinners. Get those dinners so that they're just solidify that they're a whole foods, properly prepared diet, which would be no packaging, healthy fats, good healthy protein, and your plate would be like Alex and I talked about, and you would just divide it into 3s. And another thing is to use your hand. Like if you said 1 to 2 palms of my hand of protein. So not my hand, your hand, because that makes it bio-individual to you. Couple thumbs of fat, 1 to 2 thumbs of fat. So that's like a tablespoon. And the rest load with vegetables.
Yeah.
And if you want carbs, that they fit in the palm of your hand, cupped hand. And if you really want carbs because you need more, then 2 cupped hands. But that's a good way to start. And that would also, or your plate in 3rds. And then make it where it's Monday through Sunday of that week. You have absolutely, like I said, rock star. Put a star on your chart. Even like psychology, we love, like, that's why it works for kids. If you see, and you don't want to break the chain of crosses. I even have stars for my people that see me locally. Like I give them a little baggie of stars. So put stars on your chart. Put smiley faces. Do something on a calendar, like a printed on your refrigerator. Then once you get the dinner locked in, now it's week 2. Keep eating the dinner and then move it to breakfast or lunch. And then do that for a week. And now you're 2 weeks in and your breakfast, or say it's lunch and dinner, are totally rocked out, because you might be taking leftovers from dinner for tomorrow's lunch. Excuse me. And every night doesn't have to be a new recipe. It can be super easy. It can be a hamburger or a chicken breast fried in a pan or air fried. Steam some broccoli and put some butter on it. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a big gourmet. And put some spice. Get some spices. Spices also are loaded with minerals. And then after you get that done, it's breakfast. And then once you've gotten into all 3 weeks, now you're totally in, that's when you start your 30 days and go, okay, I'm really going to do this. And stay off the scale or don't. Weigh yourself or measure yourself or don't. Drink your water. That's one thing we didn't talk about. Drink your water. Same thing. If you are starting to drink water and you know that you need half your body weight in pure water, there's no substitute for it, half your body weight in ounces. So if you weighed 100 pounds, it'd be 50 ounces. You might only be drinking 32 ounces right now today. So stick the stake in the ground, and tomorrow it's 36.
And then it's easy.
Yes. And you slowly start working it up. And if you say, okay, but I drink Diet Pepsi. I one time had a woman come to me and she was drinking a gallon of Diet Coke a day. And that's why she came, because she knew she needed to get off of it. But she wasn't going to go from drinking that gallon of, and literally, I'm not kidding. She wasn't going to go from drinking a gallon of Diet Coke to drinking no Diet Coke to drinking that. So what we did was, it started out and she drank that many ounces. And then the next day it was decrease the Diet Coke by 4 ounces and put that in with water. And then it was after 3-4 days, it was 8 ounces, and it took like 6 weeks, but she worked off and then she was drinking that in water. Do the same for yourself. Start where you are. You don't go backwards, but every few days, and even write out a calendar. And when you're doing it, and then make a reward for yourself that's not food based. Maybe it's, I don't know, get your nails done. Maybe it's get a facial. Maybe it's
go out and dance.
Yes, go out and dance. Maybe it's taking salsa lessons, maybe, I mean, that would be great for me. I would love that. But so, and I hope that the instructor is good looking.
That will be a plus.
Yes. Anyway, so I hope I wasn't going too far off there. But anyway, so yeah, so that would be what I would suggest, because I think we've talked a lot about getting the macros and healthy food and knowing what to eat. And there's a lot of help out there as well. I mean, there is, I always say the diet is free. The
Mhm.
diet information is free. Like if somebody works with me, the diet information is free. I may be guiding them and helping them, but really, in functional medicine, some people need a coach, and that's partially my job. They need a hotline. That's partially my job. I answer emails and all of that, even on the weekends with people because I care. But it's also the testing. But note that the testing and the supplements, they're not the main thing.
Mhm.
The main thing is hydration, movement, diet, and sleep.
Exactly.
And meditation, actually, which is a whole nother thing, that we could talk about as well. So just start where you are and then make the conscious effort, because guess what? You're worth it. You matter. I can't tell you that enough. You definitely matter. I mean, it almost makes, brings tears to my eyes because,
Yeah.
and I know that once you embrace it and do it, that you'll be like, why did I wait so long? And put
Yes.
yourself first. I mean, then I'll just get off my soapbox, but like the airline says, put your own face mask on first.
Mhm.
You will be more effective in your life if you put yourself first and set a boundary, even that this is for me,
Mhm.
and show up for yourself. So I think that, we've covered a lot of stuff, but that's, I guess, my extra 2 cents.
No, thank you, and
Thank you.
I love that you say that, because I think just start where you are, know where you are, and do baby steps. You don't
Mhm.
have to, because it might be like super traumatic to just stop eating what you're eating or drinking what you're eating or drinking. But
Yep.
if you do small changes, then your body slowly is gonna know what's good. You're gonna start feeling good, that you're gonna want more good.
Yes. And
So
your
that,
innate intelligence is going to turn on.
yeah.
It's just amazing. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to tell one little tiny story.
Oh,
I'll
yes,
try and
yes,
make
yes,
it
yes.
short as I
No,
can. But
yes. Go ahead.
I had a woman come to me. This was many years ago. She was 32 years old. She'd gone through the Mayo Clinic. They knew she couldn't pick up her kids. She had 2 little boys and she was in so much pain she couldn't pick up her kids. She had an autoimmune, but she was not diagnosed because she went through the Mayo Clinic. They ended up sending her to Rochester. She had a stack of labs that were like a dictionary.
Mm.
And they knew she had positive or ANA antibodies, which meant she was either going to have MS, lupus, something of that nature, because that's the RA, rheumatoid arthritis. But
Right.
she wasn't in that full-on autoimmune, so they couldn't diagnose her. But she was in pain. This woman did not know how to boil water. She filled out, nope, she'd never cooked in her life. And she filled out her information for me and said she home cooked. And I taught her. I had to go to her house. I had to go grocery shopping with her. I had to teach her how to fry a hamburger. I had to teach her how to bake chicken. I had to teach her everything. And I don't really offer that service at this juncture, but it was few years ago, and I wasn't just starting out, but she needed me. And
Right.
I needed to help her. This woman needed help.
Yeah.
When you're a mom and you can't pick up your own, 2 and 4-year-old children, that's a problem.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to see her end up in a wheelchair. So she had marked on the intake form that 90% of her food was home cooked. So when I first read this, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And then I saw it was pizza pockets and pizzas and all these microwave type foods. And when she first started eating, we changed over her diet. She also loved Fruity Pebbles, I remember. And she came in and said, when am I going to get to go back to Fruity Pebbles? And I said, why? And she's like, because they're good, man. That's what she said to me. And I was like, okay. And over time, she started cooking and learning to cook. And there came a point in time where I said, do you still want to go back to the Fruity Pebbles? no way. Because she had to
Yes.
develop, her taste buds had to develop, and she had to change. And there's a method called Feldenkrais Method. And I keep going off into these things, but Feldenkrais Method, if you're not familiar, is that your body will only ever default to what it knows. And it can be used with all kinds of things, like if you were in a car accident and you, or not, or you just learned how to stand and you kind of, or say you drooped a shoulder and you wanted to start putting your shoulder up, and then you would say, okay, I'm going to put my shoulder up. And then all of a sudden a little bit of time goes by and you're back drooping, because that isn't going to be what works. You need to do practicing of exaggerate and even bringing the shoulder down lower, so that your body will find the path of least resistance. Because if it only knows to droop, that's the path of least resistance, but you have to show it. That's the same thing with the eating. Your body, if you only ever doing what you're doing and it only has done an acquired taste for what you're eating, you have to show it these other things. And that has to be by going even on extremes, like 30 days of strict ancestral whole health eating. And then you're going to find a way that you start sneaking some things in. I mean, that's just the breakdown, right?
Right.
For all of us, and myself included. I'm sure with you too. Like, it's like there's something in there that's like, oh, okay. But and then I have to bring myself off some things. You're probably like, what are those things? But anyway, so you know, it might be dark chocolate or something like that. And then all of a sudden the little square turns into the whole bar. And there's also too much of a good thing. You can eat too much, too many paleo snacks. I use paleo a lot. But anyway, so this woman, she ended up being able to pick up her kids. We don't know what autoimmune she ever had because it wasn't diagnosed, and it never manifested itself into the full blown, but it was enough where she was in pain and couldn't pick up her kids. But the moral, or there's not a moral of the story, the punchline here is that she came to me and didn't want to. I remember even the first week away, she came back and I looked at her food journal and it was like she'd switched everything to all fruit. So every meal was fruit, because she craved the carbs and she was skinny as a rail. So that's the other misconception, is that, okay, well, you're skinny, you can eat whatever you want. And doesn't mean it's not doing damage. So she switched from eating processed foods to all fruit. And I'm not going to knock that, but I'm not a fruitarian. I'm not a proponent of that. I don't think that's a balanced diet. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I think that it's also loaded with high fruit or fructose, which can be hard on the liver.
I mean, it's a fact. It's not balanced. It needs balance. So
yes. So, but once she migrated into that and she wanted to get back to the Fruity Pebbles for a long bit. And I just kept saying, no, you can't, or you can do whatever you want, but if you're going to work with me, I can't help you if you won't do this. Because every conversation will keep being around doing the plan, and then we can't move on to other things. And eventually she didn't want to go back. So you won't either. Whoever's listening to this, you won't either. Once you start, you will look and say, I'm never going back, because I'm never going back. And what is back to? Standard American diet. I'm never going back.
Yeah, there's no way. Once you have done it properly, where your body's feeling good, your brain is feeling good, you feel awake all the time, you have energy to go out and go for a walk and start exercise, and even just life itself, like you become more social. Like, it's this whole thing about it. When you're nourishing your body and your brain properly, your emotional better, you're physically better. Just, it's the whole around thing that you're just great. So definitely, whoever is listening, if you want to make a change, but you can't just take out the bandage too crazy, and you want to baby steps, it's fine too. You could either any way you want, but just make that change, I think. And
yes, 100%.
And then you'll see it. And as you mentioned, sometimes some people can't really do it by themselves. They do need like a support team. So in this case, they can find coaches like you, holistic practitioners and functional medicine like you. Where can they find you if anyone wants to talk to you more about it, and or if they want some sort of coaching for this?
Well, you can find me on social media under Heidi Toy Functional Medicine. I have both a Facebook page and an Instagram. And you can also find me at my website, which is the best way probably, because then if you want to talk to me, I have several different ways. I mainly work in packages, but I have consult where it's like a discovery call to find out if this is a fit, that you want to ask me some questions about working with me and let me get to know you and you get to know me more. And also, if we're not a fit or I'm not the right practitioner with you, I'm not going to take you. I will help you find somebody that's the right practitioner, because we all specialize in different things. But it's Heidi Toy, HEIDITOY, just like it sounds, Heidi Toy, functionalmedicine.com. And you can sign up for a discovery call. I also have something that I mentioned, which is called Energy RX, which goes through all of these different foundations, and it's designed for women. I don't have a male version of it right now, but for women to take back their energy. And that is, I'm taking a group through right now, and then there will be a new group coming up that's coming in the early, like end of May, early June. That's the goal. And that is that's a 12-week, 90-day program. And you get a nutritional energy assessment at the beginning and the end. You get live calls, private Facebook group, and then all of this in detail. I don't know how many hours there are, but there's like, I gave like essential fatty acid talk last night. That was an hour, or Wednesday night, excuse me, that went an hour and 20 minutes. So like each week I'm talking in depth with slides and handouts. There's like 45 downloadable pieces of material that you can take, so you have access right at your fingertips. So that's a way to work with me. And then you can also work with me one-on-one, where if you need testing and things of that nature, again, you can follow me, or follow my blog posts. I also give free webinars from time to time. Free, it's underneath Learn and Heal. You can just go to my website, poke around. So follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, go to my website, sign up to talk to me if you want and need to get in contact. And then last but not least, I also have something called a quick pick, which is a 45-minute talk with me. I don't read tests, I don't write protocols, but you may say, I'm doing this and I just need help. I'm like self-guiding myself, but I just want to talk to someone and have a real person and talk to them. And that is a way that you don't have to be in a group program or a package if you're not in a program with me, because the packages are designed to have an outcome. Obviously, I always want the outcome. And so it's where we're working together for a time. I have 2 weeks, 3 months, 8 months, but they also include testing and all that kind of stuff. But some people don't need that. They don't want that. I talked to a woman today actually on a quick pick. She's working with somebody else, but she wanted to ask and get my take on her hormone cycling. And so I talked to her about that, because I have my own background, and not just my personal background, my education, I'm saying. So she wanted to get another practitioner's opinion. I'm not getting her the hormones or running the tests. I'm just giving her my opinion based on what she's showing me and telling me she's doing. And then she's going to decide to do with it what she wants. So there's many different ways, and there's a lot of great practitioners. So if I'm not the one for you, maybe we find somebody that is better fit for you. But I work with men and women, and I work with them all over, just like what we're doing here via Zoom. And I also see people in person. So, testing, people always ask, well, how do I do the testing? Testing for functional medicine doesn't matter where you live. The person you're going to run it at home. and then it's going to be FedEx to the lab. That's every functional medicine practitioner, even if they're in your town. So if you're in LA, the lab for functional medicine is like, say, if you're running a stool test, isn't in LA, it's going to be shipped to that lab of whoever they're using. And we all kind of use the same ones. So
yes. I love that. Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are when it comes to testing. It's, as you said, you do it from home and then you ship it where the lab is located.
Right.
And so I will put all your information, all the links, and your website, your social media. So if people wants to get a hold of you, they can easily do that there. And
thank you.
yeah. And if for anyone that would like to know more about my show, you guys know already where to find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Remember, my book is out. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. It's called Parents, My Greatest Teachers. If you like the book, leave me a review, DM me if you want to talk about it. Everything is welcome. Thank you so much, Heidi, for being with us today. It was such an amazing conversation with a lot of good tips for everyone that is listening. So thank you, everyone, for listening today, and have a blessed day. Thank you.
You too. Take care.